Hello, and welcome back to the weekly astrology forecast, where we weave the major transits of the week into the phases of the lunar cycle. I am your host, Sarah Paasch, and this week brings us to that first quarter lunar phase with the moon in Scorpio. If you were with us last week, you know that we introduced the Leo new moon and the Leo lunar cycle. And we talked about how what was baked into that Leo new moon is this really intense opposition to Pluto. And something that I shared in my social media posts about this Leo new moon was that the signification of this is going to play out all the way through 2043. That means that every Leo new moon that we have from now until 2043, it's going to be positioned in this opposition to Pluto and Aquarius. And this is really revealing on that Leo Aquarius axis of our charts, this spiral of healing and evolution that's taking place for us over the next 20 years. So if you haven't already, go ahead and check out that post on social media. It's linked below. And included in that are some specific themes to look for depending on your rising sign. And with that in mind, I'm curious, how did everybody experience this Leo new moon opposite Pluto? Did you have a sense of what this 20-year evolution or healing process might be about for you? Did it give you this illumination or this spotlight of the current timeline starting point, like the first thing that we need to evolve, that we need to say yes and lean into change around within those themes of the Leo Aquarius parts of our chart? Comment below. Let me know how you're feeling. If you are somebody who would like to get more of that one-on-one, really high quality focus on you and how these transits are impacting you, which transits should have the highest priority for you to focus on, and how that's working with your natal chart and timing, you can find the link below to book a one-on-one session with me. I got to admit, for myself, I really enjoyed the energy of this Leo new moon. It was energizing, it was empowering. It felt like I was ready to really shed in that plutonic kind of way the things that really just aren't serving me anymore. Just a little personal share for me. I have a Libra rising, which means that this Leo new moon and this Pluto opposition is falling across my 11th and 5th house axis. So some of the things that are being revealed to me to look deeper and feel deeper into is this tension or struggle that I experience between my desire to create from a pure place of inspiration and joy, and this part of me that feels this desire to really perform and perfect a good result, something that I can produce and call good for this 11th house community, my people, you guys. And so there's all these layers, like, what is my definition of good to the part of me that's giving me that standard? And like true Pluto work, asking myself, what am I afraid would happen if I surrendered my attachment to all of that? The attachment of the recognition or praise, the acceptance and stamp of good from anybody outside of myself. I mean, I don't need to go into a deep therapy session with you about things that I'm uncovering, but I just wanted to share a little bit about the ways that I'm working with this. I'm excited to also foreshadow for you guys, I'm going to be implementing a few creative changes to the format of this podcast. I'm working on them behind the scenes during this Mercury retrograde, and my intention is to continue to just pour my energy into places that feel really authentic and fun for me in the process of creating, because if not, what is really the point? So more to come on all of those things. And again, comment below if you feel open to sharing. I'd love to hear if there's anything being illuminated or spotlighted, any fears that you're being encouraged to confront and to question. And with that, let's go ahead and get into this week's episode. So this week is going to bring us to that first quarter lunar phase. This phase of the lunar cycle is always about learning through trial and error. It's about taking our intentions that we set during the week of the new moon and experimenting with them by putting them into action. It's about getting messy. It's about getting into action. And this week really begins and ends at a completely different energy and feeling tone. So I really want to just encourage you to listen all the way through this episode, and also to live all the way through that first quarter lunar phase week of transits, knowing that how it begins, if it begins feeling a little bit heavy and hard, maybe a little bit tender, by the end of the week, by the end of that first quarter lunar phase going into that Aquarius full moon, we're going to be feeling a lot different. And so, really making sure that we can just hold that into awareness for ourselves, hold that into context, and just do what we can to process what we need to process in the beginning, and also make ourselves open and available for that shift to come and to take us and to move with it. Okay, let's go ahead and dive in. We'll begin with that first major transit. It's on Friday, August 1st. On Friday, we're going to have the moon in Scorpio making that exact square to the sun in Leo. And on that same day, Venus in Cancer is making that exact square to Saturn and Neptune retrograde in Aries. Taking into consideration this recognition that both the moon and Venus are signifiers of relationship in our lives. And these planets, both the moon and Venus, are in very difficult positions on Friday. So I was feeling like Friday might feel like this exhaustion of the heart. And we can think of that almost like a heart dehydration. It's kind of like the caregiver, the person who's giving the hugs usually is the person who needs a hug, and there's nobody available to give them a hug. So they're extremely dehydrated. They are in need of receiving, and they've been overgiving. And so there's kind of this sobering reality check of where we might be overgiving and where we might need to reset or rebalance and adjust our boundaries, really acknowledging that in order to be the caregiver that we want, we have to also maybe acknowledge where we aren't giving that first to ourselves, and maybe not even first, maybe not even at all. Are you somebody who is so apt to respond when somebody calls and needs something, to attend to that, to give the hug, but maybe you shy away from acknowledging that you need a hug sometimes or you need a break? Friday is kind of this reality check to say, yeah, I've needed a break for a while. I've needed a hug for a while. And the reality is that I'm actually the one that needs to give myself that hug. I'm actually the one that needs to call my energy back, that needs to get real with myself around what are my needs? What is my self-care strategy? So Friday feels heavy. It feels hard. It feels tender. I wish I could be available to give everybody a hug, but I'm really going to use Friday to focus on really amplifying self-care, to give space for whatever feelings need to come up. There might be old wounds that get triggered under this energy that process, like the remembering of imbalanced relationships where we didn't feel like our needs or feelings mattered. Either way, I think that Friday is an invitation for self-care, for deep, deep self-care, and for this really important pause before we pivot moving forward, because we really need to check ourselves that we are showing up in alignment with the standards of what it is that we're trying to call in. So one of the key factors of consideration for this Venus square Saturn Neptune is looking back to what was happening around March 22nd, 2025. This is a wake-up call back to the clarity that was coming during that time. It was on March 22nd that Venus retrograde had her inferior conjunction to the sun, the retrograde Cazimi. And that's always the point where Venus is actually starting a new cycle. It's the point where we get a call of clarity around what the retrograde is about, like the things in the relationships that aren't working or need to change, or maybe the deeper healing and patterns that we're being asked to look at. And this Cazimi happened to be at 2 degrees of Aries, almost the exact degree that Venus is now squaring Saturn and Neptune retrograde in Aries. So there is a callback. There is a wake-up callback to that Cazimi moment, to that Venus retrograde. So just pause for a moment and ask yourself, if I think back to that moment, what were some of the things that I was really getting clear on that were ready to change and evolve around my standards of relationship, my standards of exchange, the things that I really value in relationship, the things that I long for, and that I'm ready to really open my heart for something different, something potentially more meaningful, especially with that Saturn-Neptune involvement with that retrograde. So now kind of check in with yourself on Friday. It might be really obvious. It might be uncomfortably, vulnerably honest and obvious. It's like we're being asked to pause, to see, to feel. What is it that we don't feel around those Cazimi clarities is fully being met or considered? This could be bringing up something where we recognize I've been calling this certain desire in, I've been calling in this change or this new standard of partnership. And yet I recognize that there's something that I might still be holding on to that's blocking that space to be open to receive what it is that I'm calling in. And so some of these things that could be presented as barriers, the things that we're holding on in the way of what we're calling in, it could show up as old beliefs, still running the programming of the heart. It could be actual relationships that we're still involved in and investing in, even though it's very clear this relationship exchange does not match the value of what I realized back in March I am ready to call in. It could be relationship patterns. It could be that we asked for a new standard of relationship and we're still stuck in an old way of communicating our feelings and needs. There could be a lack of boundary. There could be fears showing up around intimacy or maybe potentially even impatience. Is there a timing factor that's playing into this? Is there grief that's maybe showing up because part of you feels this deep longing and it's still not quite manifested? Regardless, I just want to give everyone permission to feel your feels on Friday, to make sure that you really give yourself high levels of self-care and giving yourself that hug, whatever that means for you, depending on your moon sign, your Venus sign. That hug can be symbolic in many different ways. And while it might be hard to look at, it might be hard to acknowledge and take accountability for, if we're willing to allow this transit to show us and to guide us, it might be the right time to start asking and taking action on letting go. This is like a moment of radical responsibility and accountability to really mature our relationships with ourselves, with our feelings and needs. And of course, if you are watching this before this transit, before Friday, then maybe preparing a little bit by reaching out to somebody that you know is a super safe space for you to feel your feels, for you to get that hug, whether it's virtually or in person physically. Just know through this virtual screen, I'm giving you a big hug on Friday. And then after this big exhale or potential cry on Saturday, we start to feel the energy shift. It's like we've cleared space, we've rested. Hopefully, we wake up Saturday ready to jump into something new, jump into something fun. Because on Saturday, August 2nd, not only is Venus separating from those tough squares to Saturn and Neptune retrograde in Aries, we also have the moon shifting into Sagittarius. And this is definitely a mood lift on its own, but it's extra fun and extra uplifting because we know that when the moon is in Sagittarius, it's being ruled and hosted by that exalted Jupiter in Cancer with that mutual reception. So there's a boost in the upliftment that this Sagittarius moon can give us. In addition, that moon is activating a grand fire trine through Saturday and Sunday with Saturn and Neptune retrograde in Aries. And then it's also going to trine that Sun and Mercury retrograde in Leo. And it's opposing Uranus and Gemini. So this is like fun on fun on fun. If you don't have something fun planned for Saturday, here's your cue. Find something to do, something fun, because this energy wants to bring you up and out. Fire moves in the direction of upward and outward, right? And so with the moon really weaving together all of those planets and the fire signs right now, this is a weekend where you benefit from following your joy, from following any kind of spontaneous impulse or inspiration that leads you somewhere new. Don't forget, we've got Uranus and Gemini sitting across from that moon. So the more that we can put ourselves out there, the more that we can engage with the world around us with this, availability to let things lighten, to let things move, especially after Friday's clarity. It's like, yeah, I'm not doing that anymore. I am not getting stuck being the one at home, doing all the things and not getting my needs met, not having any fun. I'm ready to fill my cup. I'm going to dance it out. And that's really what this moon in Sag wants us to do. Wants us to get back out there, wants us to remember the fun and bring some light back into our lives. I'm really excited because I didn't plan this, but it's so astrology good. I'm going to be with a big group of friends. We're going to be traveling to San Diego, sharing an Airbnb together, going to a concert, like one of my favorite EDM artists. So I'm going to be dancing with the people I love. I'm going to be in a new place, and it's just going to be so fun. And it's so astrology good. And I'm glad that somebody else had a birthday and wanted to make that happen, and that I just so happen to benefit. So, what's your party plans for that weekend? Do you have anything planned? Are you hosting something? Are you excited to maybe put yourself out there in a new way? So, comment below. I'd love to hear if you're watching this. How are you feeling going into this week with that heavy Moon Venus energy on Friday? And are you excited that it's probably going to be more fun on Saturday, Sunday? Do you have anything planned? Comment below. I'd love to hear. Okay, so the next major transit of this week is going to be on Wednesday, August 6th. And this is the day that Mars officially enters into Libra. Dun dun dun. Mars is going to be in Libra between August 6th until September 22nd. And even though Mars technically has a decrease in dignity because Mars is in what's called its detriment, a place where it is exiled or as far away from home, its Aries home, as it can get, I actually think there's going to be an improvement for Mars and the function of Mars in our charts once Mars enters Libra. And I'm going to tell you why. One, I believe that because Mars in Libra is now going to be ruled by Venus. And Venus is in Cancer. At this point on Wednesday, she is separating from that square to Saturn and moving towards applying to a conjunction to the greater benefic, exalted Jupiter in Cancer. So Venus is in a very good place, and Venus can see Mars by that natural square of Cancer to Libra. So he can see the person that's hosting. She's in a good spot. She's got good resources. That helps Mars out. So with Mars moving into Libra, I do want to just spend a little bit of time talking about that placement and that dignity. Mars is the planet of action, of drive, of really seeing what it is that we want and being able to go get it. Mars is the fight in all of us. It is a planet that loves to win. It loves to conquer. It loves to compete. Mars prefers to work on its own, to follow its instincts. So Mars in the home of Venus in Libra struggles because where Mars wants to compete, it has to harmonize with others. Where Mars wants to conquer, it has to learn how to collaborate. Where Mars would rather just go solo, Mars has to partner up and go learn how to work together. Where Mars would rather just follow its instincts, take action based off of feeling or inspiration. In Libra, this air sign Mars has to be more rational. It has to pause and think things through. It has to incorporate a sense of social awareness that Mars would rather not have to deal with. And so that can be tough because Mars can feel thwarted by that. Mars can feel like really frustrated by its inability to just do what it wants to do on its own instinct, on its own time, on its own, because that won't work for Mars in Libra. Mars has to really learn how to function in a way outside of its comfort zone. And so one of my astro besties, Alexandra Blair of 9 Lives Astrology, one of the things she said in just a random, text conversation that's really stuck with me when I think about detriments and planets and detriments, she said, when you go visit a foreign place, when you go somewhere you've never been before, a different city or a different country, it's not about going there and being a tourist. It's actually about going to a place that you've never been, that isn't your home, and learning who you are, what kind of person you are in that environment. What is it that Mars can learn about himself? What is it that we can learn about the nature of our Mars or our relationship with Mars through living through this transit of Mars in Libra in a place that is foreign to it, that is not home to it? What is it going to teach us about Mars? All right, so now that we have officially set the stage for Mars entering into Libra, we're going to go into the final transit. Mars entering into Libra is going to be having this kite formation by making a grand air trine with Uranus and Gemini and Pluto and Aquarius. So wherever the air signs are in our chart, this grand air trine is going to provide a lot of natural flow and momentum of energy available in those areas of our life. Sometimes trines and grand trines, they're these temporary moments. They're these really auspicious opportunities that come, but they can come and go really quickly. And if we aren't paying attention, or if we aren't actively putting ourselves into participation, we can kind of miss that window. And what's really cool about this grand air trine with Mars, Uranus, and Pluto is that it's in this kite formation. Mars is not just making those grand air trines, Mars is also opposing Saturn retrograde, Neptune retrograde in Aries. And that opposition, while on its own, would be something that would be really heavy and hard and challenging to work with. On its own, I would be a little bit like caution, but actually, it's the tension and the energy of that opposition that gives this kite so much more potential for Mars. And we talked about this last week that the tail of the kite, the opposition point, that actually is the key driver and catalyst where we are going to direct the energy for this kite to fully take flight. And because that opposition between Mars and Saturn, Neptune, and Aries is the anchor point or the release point and the catalyst point for the kite aspect, we're going to spend a little time talking about that Mars, Saturn, Neptune specifically, because this is the point where we want to direct our focus, intention, and action in order to manifest the greatest potential of success of working with this really auspicious, really rare alignment in astrology. So let's talk about Mars and Saturn. Let's talk about them in opposition. Whew. Whenever we have Mars, Saturn in aspect together, these are transits that really bring reward from hard efforts, specifically hard efforts that we've been putting and pouring ourselves into consistently over time. People born with Mars, Saturn are people that have an incredible grit, an ability to persevere, an ability to overcome and see through because of this fortification through challenge that has been developed. And so this Mars-Saturn opposition is asking us to really take into consideration, what is it that I'm aligning my actions into that I'm willing to commit to for a long-term strategy, that I'm willing to really develop my grit through overcoming whatever obstacles might come up. This opposition is saying you have to choose the right commitment. You have to choose the right long-term outcome goal, whatever it is, that's going to be worth every challenge along the way. And when we say yes to that, when we're willing to put ourselves into the arena of Mars Saturn, there's a really incredible potential for that Saturnian reward to bring something real into form. And I also want to point out that Mars and Saturn in the signs of Libra and Aries are in what's called a mutual reception. On their own, they're both not doing so hot. Saturn is in Aries in its depression or its fall, most difficult place Saturn can be, and Mars is in Libra in its detriment. However, Mars is the ruler of Aries, that's its home, loves Aries, and Saturn is exalted in Libra. Saturn is like praised for Saturn things in Libra. So if they're willing to work together to exchange resources, they actually can help each other out a lot. And what was coming to me when I was thinking of this, it was so funny. It's like so perfect. If you've ever seen the movie with Jason Bateman and Ryan Reynolds, it's called The Change Up. And it's one of those movies where they're friends and they, drunkenly make a wish to be in each other's lives and wake up the next morning and they are literally in each other's bodies. And it's about this relationship between these two friends where Jason Bateman is the stereotypical Saturn in Libra, this lawyer who is a family man, but is basically just exhausted because he's just overworking. There's no soul, there's no joy, there's no spontaneity in his life. He's just crossing off the to-do list, doing everything right, being a great husband, being a great dad, moving up in the company. Yet it's like he's gotten a little bit dry, a little bit hard on the outside. And then we've got Ryan Reynolds, who is the Aries character in the movie. He is the struggling actor who hasn't really gotten his shit together on any level around taking responsibility and being an adult. And so when they switch bodies, they're like, at first they would think, oh, this is so fun. I finally get to be the thing I've always wanted to be. And they realize very quickly it's not as easy as it looks. And it's so similar to this idea of this Mars-Saturn mutual reception. And if you remember that idea of being a tourist and learning about yourself by being somewhere else, not just visiting somewhere else, but actually growing and learning about yourself through that experience, it's like, how can Mars and Saturn in this opposition learn to embrace this uncomfortable and also unknown, potentially, territory that they're in as an opportunity to develop themselves and also to learn more about the other person and the other way of being or the other way of life. I don't want to give away the movie, but by the end, it becomes one of these things where both men, both friends, are actually developed and matured in a way that when they do switch back, they have such a greater appreciation and they show up in their own lives and their own realities ready to make changes that give them a more holistic sense of being, whether that's Ryan Reynolds actually taking some responsibility for himself and getting some, adult shit done, or that's Jason Bateman realizing that there's some things he takes for granted because he's just way too focused and serious. And so when you look to the Aries Libra axis of your chart, what houses do Aries and Libra rule? What is that polarity or axis of life? And taking into consideration everything that we're thinking about, what can we receive from Saturn around these lessons of social tact, around being able to take a step back and open our ability to rationally, intellectually hold space for the truth of more than black and white, right? Saturn's able to be this fair judge, this fair observer. And then what is it that we can receive from that Mars Aries energy around learning how to trust our instincts, around being a little bit more bold and being in action? What is it that Mars can tell us about proper fight, proper self-assertion, around being courageous, even in the face of fear and going your own way? And then finally, reflecting on the polarity between Aries and Libra in your chart, and where you might feel a sort of tension. You might sort of feel this sort of competing energy, this one or the other that's happening. And how can we locate the common center point that lives and connects between those two? How can Mars and Saturn in these areas in this opposition come together to work towards a common cause rather than competing against each other? Maybe as they both work towards these causes in these separate places, it's actually going to grow the entire potential and success of both together. So it really is this chance to be really aware of where we get stuck in an either or mentality. It's either success here or success there. And we have to start to question, what would it be like to eliminate the either or of this equation? What if it's both and? And so really taking everything that we just talked about with Mars, Saturn, and now we infuse Neptune into the equation, which means that whatever we're consciously saying yes to, whatever we're committing to, we benefit from infusing a really deep purpose, a greater sense of connection to the meaning behind the why of what we're doing. Why are we committed? Why does it even matter to climb that mountain, to achieve that success? Neptune wants you to have a vision that is inclusive of not just yourself, but how does this impact more than just myself? What is a potential impact on a collective level? And collective doesn't have to mean the whole world. It could be the collective of your roommates that you live with. It could be the collective with your coworkers or the company and the job that you're at. That collective is defined based off of whatever is your reality, and specifically around that Libra Aries axis, that collective that we're talking about. And then I also think Neptune invites us to soften and invite a little bit more compassion and intuition and imagination into whatever it is that we're signing up for, whatever it is that we're committing to remember to remain open and flexible, to not be too fixated on a strategy and action plan that we initially put into place, to keep ourselves available to kind of be guided or to be shown moment to moment, trusting that even if it's not what we originally planned, if we hold that intention clearly, if it's really pure in our hearts and we maintain integrity to that moment to moment, action by action, choice by choice, then we will inevitably end up to either where it is that we intended or somewhere even greater. So again, this Kite activation begins on Friday, August 8th. And as Mars moves forward into Libra, it's actually going to sustain or hold the energy of the Grand Air Trine in opposition all the way through Sunday, August 10th. So thinking about that window, that weekend, this is a moment to not just rest on your laurels, but to say yes. Where is it that life is, if you say yes, if you are committed, life is saying you're ready to take flight. Not to mention that this kite is totally baked into the Aquarius full moon. So you're going to want to be sure, if you aren't already, subscribe, turn your notifications on, because next week we are going to be going into that bright and bold Aquarius full moon phase. And kind of similar to the Mercury retrograde Cazimi that we talked about last week, there's a little bit of a secret beginning point and connection to a 2027 eclipse. We're going to go into all those details and also get into one of the best days of 2025 in next week's episode, how to work with it, how to make the most of it. So you'll want to be sure to be here next week joining us for that episode. A quick little reminder that if you're looking for more, you can check all the links below. You can get that Spotify playlist that I made for the Leo lunar cycle, as well as links to my social media pages with the kind of deeper writing reflections and prompts around this lunar cycle and its themes. And then also I have a custom astrology calendar that I made that is immediately available for download in your smartphone calendar. And so that has all of the transits in it with interpretations and reflection prompts. It also has all of the moon void of course included in that calendar, which is really good to know if you are somebody that has to schedule a lot of things or is booking a lot of travel. Knowing when to avoid those moon void of course is very, very helpful. So it's on sale right now. It's only $45. All of that is linked below. Thank you everybody for joining me this week. If you enjoyed this episode, if you enjoyed this podcast, again, please like this video, share this video, comment how you're doing, what you're feeling. I am wishing everybody a super blessed launch into flight on this first quarter lunar phase, and I will see you next week.